Right. The Ninth Gate, Polanski's 1999 supernatural thriller. It had absolutely no business being this atmospheric and creepy, although somehow it manages to snatch disappointing defeat from the jaws of a brilliant victory, just like Scotland playing football. Now, before you lot start typing about separating art from artist, I know the man's persona non grata, but the bastard still knows how to craft dread. The question you should be asking is, how does a film with this much going for it, Depp, before he became a parody of himself, Frank Langella chewing scenery like it's his last meal, genuinely creepy occult atmosphere, great story, great premise, how does it completely balls up something as simple as sticking the bloody landing? And Stephen King didn't write it. Stick around, the answer's more infuriating than you think. Here's what actually works. Dean Corso, played by Johnny Depp, is a morally flexible rare book dealer who gets hired by wealthy collector Boris Balkan to authenticate 3 copies of the 9 Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows, a rare book supposedly co-authored by Satan himself. Only 1 copy is genuine, we're led to believe, and Balkan wants the real deal. So, Corso, on this billionaire ticket, gallivants across Europe, getting progressively more tangled in supernatural shenanigans, pursued by a mysterious woman who may or may not be the actual whore of Babylon, while dodging deadly collectors and witnessing increasingly impossible events. It's a bit like the Da Vinci Code if Dan Brown had actually read a book and wasn't terrified of genuine menace. The premise is genuinely intriguing because it grounds supernatural horror in the tangible world of rare book dealing, authentication, provenance, historical documentation. Let's start with what Polanski gets absolutely right, because there's more here than you'd expect from a film most people have forgotten. This is pre-Pirates, pre-Mad Hatter nonsense, when Johnny Depp could still disappear into a character, as Dean Corso is appropriately sleazy, appropriately cynical, and appropriately out of his depth, just like I am. And here's where some numpty in makeup should have been sacked. They gave this barely 40-year-old actor the most unconvincing grey temples this side of a community theatre hamlet. It's like watching a sixth former play King Lear. Technically competent, but fundamentally ridiculous when you're supposed to believe he's a middle-aged book dealer with decades of experience. Frank Langella attacks Boris Balkan with a kind of theatrical relish that would make Brian Blessed weep with envy. Here's a man who understands that when you're playing a millionaire occultist seeking immortality through demonic intervention, subtlety is about as useful as a chocolate teapot. And because of that, he really camps it up magnificently, delivering Latin incantations with more conviction than most people order coffee. But it never crosses into parody. There's a fine line lesser actors would have trampled like stampeding cattle. And the cinematography, and this is where the film genuinely excels. Darius Conde's cinematography is, without a doubt, sublime. The man knows how to shoot in darkness while still letting the audience see what's happening. A skill that seems lost in modern cinema's obsession with making everything look like it was shot through a coal scuttle. Those wide shots that seamlessly become close-ups without cuts. Magnificent. The contrasting light sources, the persistent interplay of warm and cool tones creating genuine unease. The moody European locations, dusty Parisian apartments, Portuguese estates, Spanish castles, all shot with an eye for both beauty and menace. And that's when you get this escalating sense of dread that feels earned rather than manufactured. When supernatural elements start manifesting, the visual language supports them perfectly. Appropriately, for a movie like this, the devil is in the details. The film is stuffed with clever touches that reward attention and rewatching. The child's voice calling warnings, the immortal twins, the keypad entry of 666, increasingly obvious supernatural interventions. These aren't accidents, they're deliberate breadcrumbs leading deeper into the occult labyrinth. In a story about distinguishing reality from falsity, every interaction becomes suspect. But then we hit the problems, and sweet suffering Christ, are they frustrating? Emmanuelle Seigner, she is, without doubt, a charisma vacuum. And I'm not one to slag off performances purely on nepotism. Half of Hollywood be unemployed. I'm looking at you, Tory spelling, if talent were the primary criterion. But Emmanuelle Seigner is the girl. Makes watching, well, paint dry. I know it's a tired allegory, but it makes it seem thrilling by comparison. She's supposed to be the embodiment of supernatural temptation. Possibly, as I said, the whore of Babylon herself. Given that, you'd expect menace, mystery, magnetic presence, pure sexual attraction. What you get instead is someone who looks like they've wandered onto set looking for catering and decided to stick around for free lunches. The performance is wooden. You could build a particularly disappointing bookshelf from it. Every scene she's in loses tension just because there's no chemistry, no threat, no genuine supernatural presence, just boredom made flesh. And remember that sublime cinematography that I praised? Well, someday, some numpty decided to film several car interior shots that looked like they were done by an enthusiastic but utterly incompetent film student. It's completely jarring, amateurish, and totally at odds with the otherwise impeccable visual craftsmanship. And then after that, after 2 hours of meticulous pacing, escalating dread, clever symbolism, atmospheric perfection, even a touch of coming to grips with your own existential existence, Polanski apparently decided to wrap things up with the narrative sophistication of a drunk explaining quantum physics. The final act feels rushed, convenient, and frustratingly vague. After spending over 2 hours building towards revelation, we get what amounts to a supernatural shrug. It's like being promised a 5-course gourmet meal and then being served a convenience store sandwich. You're left with more questions than answers. And not in a good, thought-provoking way. More in the script writers just give up way. The Ninth Gate is, simultaneously, one of the most frustrating and rewarding films in Polanski's catalogue. When it works, and it works far more often than it doesn't, it's a masterclass in atmospheric horror. Possibly career best work from Depp. Scenery chewing brilliance from Langella. Cinematography that puts most modern thrillers to shame. But when it doesn't work, and this is it, mainly when Seigner appears or the plot tries to resolve itself, it's like watching a master chef burn the souffle after perfectly executing every other course.
Are they overcooked?
Yes, chef, they are.
Oh, come on.
That gets you a film that's infinitely more interesting to think about than to actually watch. In a world where supernatural thrillers are either dumb as rocks or pretentious as art school manifestos, Ninth Gate occupies fascinating middle ground, intelligent enough to engage your brain, atmospheric enough to creep you out, but ultimately too clever by half for its own good. I'm going to give it 7 out of 10. It's like a really good book with brilliant chapters and a completely shite ending. Again, I might be looking at you, Stephen. It's worth a journey even if the destination makes you want to throw it across the room. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need a whiskey to wash the taste of wasted potential out of my mouth. I'm great.